It is the last one from Dell's gaming lineup of pre-built desktops. This is the G5. Hey guys, welcome back to Hardware Sense channel. My name is Ivan and today we're talking about Dell's gaming G5 pre-built desktop. A lot of you have asked me the question, how is it different compared to the XPS 8940? How is it different against some of the other companies' pre-builds like HP, their pavilions? And what I think about this one. So I had to naturally grab one of these. Around the President's Day weekend, there was a lot of great deals, and some of you probably already grabbed those deals just like myself. This particular G5 features 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. Interesting thing, the RAM is actually 3200 megahertz, but it's downclocked to 2666 because the CPU inside is i5 10400F, and only the i7s and above are benefiting from faster memory, and it's clocked at 2933. Now, what else is coming here? We have the GTX 1660 Ti, great card. I have multiple of those, and I still like to get more if I had my hands on for MSRP. And again, this is the only way to get a graphics card today on MSRP is buying one of those pre-builds on a great deal. That way you don't have to pay obscene amount of money. These TIs are going above $400. I've seen them go for $500 too. So you can imagine if you pay $640 what I paid for this pre-build, just the CPU and the graphics card cost as much. So GTX 1660 Ti, we have 10400F, we have 16 gigabytes of RAM, we have 512 gigabytes of NVMe storage, and the 360 watt power supply. Unfortunately, I could not upgrade this one because it was pre-build set configuration. You couldn't do any other modifications. Otherwise, I would have grabbed the upgraded 500 watt power supply because it's a lot better, future proof, and you're going to be able to use much higher and much more powerful cards further down the road. But there's a lot to talk about this 360 watt power supply. I already have very interesting things to show you about them and what Dell have done inside this specific configuration to accommodate the GTX 1660 Ti, because you guys know the 1660 Ti uses 8-pin power connector, but that power supply doesn't feature one. So what have they done? I'm gonna get you closer and you're gonna see all the details, and we're gonna talk about what are the differences between the G5 and the XPS 8940. Being the same exact chassis, there's a subtle few differences inside, which I think the G5 are actually doing better compared to the XPS, which benefits us at the end when we want to modify and we want to do some changes. And modifying we will. I already have additional storage to add. I already have one of those OEM Dell cooler towers that I'm going to add, and I already have a few other things that I'm going to show you how to improve the cooling performance and the silence with this G5, and that applies with pretty much all SKUs, even if you have higher CPUs up to i9. I think they are supporting i9 10900, non-K versions, i7s and everything else. But without further ado, let's go ahead. We're gonna check out the internals and we're gonna do all the possible, at the moment, upgrades. All right, so here are the few things I wanna show you and point out to you immediately when you open the G5. You will notice that the frame is pretty much the same as the one you saw in my previous video on the XPS 8940. We're missing the top cage right here, which is excellent. We don't need that anyway. It was on my way on the XPS. I really don't need it. They have included the front hard drive cage, which I'm immediately gonna remove because again, I'm not needing this and I need to gain the access to the space behind where the perforations are, where I'm going to install my intake fan. And what I'm gonna use as an intake fan, I'm actually gonna source this fan from the stock cooling solution as an intake fan while I'm replacing this cooler with the stock OEM tower that Dell are supplying for some of those K level CPUs. Another thing to point out immediately here, the 1660 Ti comes with this connector here. They use the stock 360 watt power supply, which only has 6-pin PCI Express connector, and they give you this adapter. Look at this, 6-pin to 8-pin. I wonder why and how much money they saved. Well, I'm sure they probably saved a lot of money in not upgrading this power supply to 500 watt, but they could have easily kept the older model, which is the 460 watt instead of 500, and had a lot more connections here. But again, it's all probably cost saving for them, and now they give you this adapter to feed your 1660 Ti and possibly RTX 2060, which I'm sure 360 watt will be enough, because I've tested 310 watts with RTX 3060 in my Idea Center a year ago, and I had no problem whatsoever. So this is what we have, adapter. Let me go ahead and start removing some of those things so you can see. First thing, I'm actually going to remove this front hard drive cage because it just ruins my feng shui here. And I'm gonna disconnect these SATA cables, so they at least provide you with the SATA data and the SATA power. And the SATA data is too short for me, unfortunately, to reach these cages here. I just wish they give you a longer cable for the data, because you need to reach from here where it's on the motherboard all the way to the top two cages where you're going to be mounting them. They've already pre-routed the SATA power right here, but unlike the XPS, they're not giving you a longer cable, so I'm having to use one of my own. And I have plenty of these from different motherboards in the past, so I'm going to use this one to route it from here to the top cage, where I'm going to be installing my SK Hynix 500 watt SATA 3 SSD drive. Very easy to be installed. You just pull one of those cages, put it in and install it. But I'm going to show you all that as well. And then this comes off very easily. Interesting that it's painted black, and the one on the XPS was not painted black at all. So that's kind of a nice touch, you know, for those that care about aesthetics. But I'm not going to be using this cage, so this is going out of the way. And now look how much more space we have here to work on. We have, again, 4 slots for RAM. That's one thing that Dell is doing very good. They're giving you 4 slots, so your upgradability can expand above the 32 gigabytes normally that other pre-builds are giving you. So you can consider, if you have 2x8, later you can add another 2x8, or you can upgrade, you know, 2x32, or furthermore. I think the maximum supported is 128 gigabytes, which is abundance of memory. But at the moment, 2x8 is plenty. This is the memory they're giving you. This is Micron 3200 megahertz memory, which is very, very good. Actually, I've used that memory on my HP Pavilion gaming desktop with Ryzen 5 inside, and clocks immediately at 3200 megahertz without me having to touch Ryzen Master at all. So this is a good memory they're giving you here. We're gonna be replacing this. We're gonna put our VRM heatsink right here on top of the VRMs. And as I mentioned, this is not ideal as it's not the stock one. If you can find the stock one that bolts into the motherboard, great, but I couldn't find that. So I'm going to be using this, which comes with already pre-applied thermal pad, which sticks to the VRMs. It's not covering the VRMs 100%, but at least it's covering majority of them. Reach down here, place it over, and just push it down to stick. And that will stick pretty good, actually. It's not gonna go anywhere. So that's kind of one of the easiest cooling solutions you can do for these exposed VRMs. Have you guys already seen majority of the process with upgrading everything internal? I'm just going to show you how to add that front intake fan. So here is the GTX 1660 Ti that it's inside this one. Nothing too crazy about. Actually, I'm not a huge fan of what they've done here with the shroud, and especially the cooling solution is this cheaper sunflower version of it, no heat pipes. You know, the one that HP gives you has heat pipes, a lot better fin array. And here, just a simple shroud that looks exactly like my 1660 Super that it's on the XPS, minus, you know, now here we have 8-pin PCI Express connectors, green PCB as always, but it's good enough. I mean, it will do the job. You're not going to be stressing it too much, and it does the job. It's tiny bit noisy with this fan and no heat pipes, but again, what you can do, this is the only one you can get, and you will see right here we don't have any thermal pads that contact with the memory and the heatsink, so you're not having any really cooling done for the memory, just for the die. Potentially you can probably add your own if you want to, as the distance between the memory and the heatsink is not that much. You can grab maybe 2mm, 2.5mm thermal pads, line them up on top of the memory. That way we'll have a little bit better heat dissipation, but again, that's a subject for another project. And now that we have everything revealed, you'll see how tiny that 512GB NVMe drive is. And this one they chose here is Kioxia, which is Toshiba. Not bad. We're gonna test and see how fast it is. We have our obligatory 80mm 4-pin PWM fan in the back, which we're gonna be linking here with the front one, which is gonna be this one. So to do the front one, after removing the cage, you can take the front panel off by pulling on slightly on these 4 tabs. And that way this front panel will be detached. Just be careful with this cable, which is the LED. You'll see here this tiny board that controls the LED for the front panel, which can be customized via the software. And the software actually they're using here is the same one as Alienware. So it's just the Alienware control center software, because this is completely exposed outside and inside, and you'll see abundance of perforations of the front panel. Front panel is completely perforated, so a lot of air is gonna go through. We're just gonna grab this fan after we remove it, and we're gonna put it right here as an intake. And I'm gonna show you this, how it's done. So after taking the heatsink out, the stock heatsink out, you'll see how tiny and minuscule this thing is. And here's the fan. We are just gonna take our 4 rubber isolators, just like what we did on our HP Pavilion desktops. We're gonna pull them through, and we're gonna see how we're gonna space this cable, make sure that it's facing the back or top side of it. That way it's gonna be easier for you to route it, and it'll be more managed. And what I've done is right here, and let me see if I can reposition the camera a little bit to show you. You will see where the top perforations are through here. So what we're gonna do is reposition our fan where we want it to be. And I'm actually gonna pull these from these tabs here on the top. And then in the bottom, whatever I can find and match the holes to be easier. So see how all 4 of them are protruding now. These top ones are easily pulled out, and I can do it by hand. And you can see now the bottom ones, I'm gonna need a little bit help with my needle nose pliers to grab them and then pull through. Just like that. And once they're pulled through, that's it. This is the whole mod of adding that intake front fan. Now, you possibly can do the same thing here on the bottom. These spacings and those perforations are not identical and they're not perfect, but my idea for the future is maybe cut a bigger hole here for 12mm fan. I'm gonna figure it out how to do it in the future. Trust me, I'm gonna do that mod, and it's gonna be interesting. But for now, I'm gonna have this intake fan. So that's the whole process. We mounted this intake fan, which is gonna blow across the tower we're gonna mount, and it's gonna exhaust in the back. And now, because these rubber isolators in the back might protrude a little bit more and interfere with the back panel, you might want to consider just cutting them off a little bit, you know, with some sharp knife or X-Acto knife like myself, just to make sure that it's not gonna touch any of the front panel. I'm cutting these off, these little tabs. They're not really essential to keep it in place, but at least I'm gonna have a little bit more room. So with these cut off, now we can close the front panel and route the rest of the cables in there. And this is how the final finished product looks like. Front panel mounted on, front intake fan mounted on, tower cooler OEM mounted on, SATA cable routed, and a storage expanded right here with my 500GB SSD storage, and Y splitter from the back fan routed all the way around to the front fan. So that's it. For us, only is left to install our GTX 1660 Ti back in place. And that's it. We're gonna see the temperatures. You're gonna see the difference between the stock cooling solution and this tower with the intake. You see how much of a difference the temperatures are, but they're definitely significant and they're definitely worth it. So this kind of an easy upgrade, easiest cooling. I'm calling it easiest because it's just OEM part for your OEM part. And we are repurposing the fan of the stock cooling solution as an intake. And in the future, we're gonna do another mod with the front intake here for the graphics card. Possibly, I'm gonna do another one with upgrading the power supply to some of the higher level power supplies so we can test much higher graphics cards. Speaking of graphics cards, I'm having a RTX 3060 coming my way next week, hopefully, and we're gonna test in all these pre-builds, including the XPS, including the G5, including the HP Pavilion pre-builds. So all that is going to be tested. That graphics card will go and be tested with the stock power supplies, and we see how much exactly power we need, and it's going to be enough for that graphics card. So that's pretty much it. This is the mod. Let's go into the conclusion. On to the conclusion time. What do I really think about Dell's G5 gaming pre-built desktop? Well, I actually really like it. I like it better than the XPS for a couple of obvious reasons. The front panel of the G5 is a lot better. It's almost entirely perforated from the bottom to the top. The internal cage has a lot of perforations, so even if you're not mounting intake fan, just like I did, or possible 2 intake fans, which I'm planning to do in a future project, you're still going to get a lot more ventilation coming passively through it compared to the XPS, where the XPS, half of the desktop has perforations on the bottom and half of it on top not really, so that kind of impedes your natural air ventilation. That's why I think they did a little bit better job here, and omitting that top cage for hard drive and disk drive, for whatever reason they decided to still keep it on XPS, it's better because now you have more volume inside. You're not going to use these anyway. If you were living in today, 2021, why would you need any of that? You have 2 convenient slots for 2.5 SATA 3 drives. Just populate these if you need more storage. Storage is not that expensive today, guys. And it's a lot more faster. Trust me, if you're playing competitive games, you need those faster loading times. I'm gonna throw you an example again. Playing PUBG, a lot of teammates that are still using hard drives, by the time people are already on the plane and jumping, their screen is still loading because hard drive loading times. That's one thing you can change and fix right away by migrating to SATA 3 SSD drives instead of hard drives. Adding a front intake fan, extremely easy process. You guys see 4 ribeye isolators, just push them through the perforations in the front, link that fan with extension cable and Y splitter to the back exhaust fan. That way they can be controlled by the motherboard, and the air is going to be controlled whatever the CPU and the internals wants. That air is going to be distributed and exhausted. Easy and cheap modification. And then of course the tower cooler for the CPU. I highly recommend grabbing one of those because it's the most easiest way to upgrade your cooling solution without having to trying to find out which aftermarket cooler is working and what other things you need to buy, what kind of washers and isolators and screws to make it fit. You got to do a lot of reading and kind of legwork to go on the Dell community forums to find out what exactly is working. And most of the times it's probably going to cost you even more. Now the other route that I personally would have gone if I couldn't get those tower coolers is just go ahead and remove the motherboard, cut those standoffs that are coming from the metal frame in the back, and just use a regular cooler with its own backplate. That way it's going to cost me a lot less. Grab one of those snowmans for $16, put it in here, off you go. But again, if you find those Dell OEM coolers, I highly recommend getting those. Temperatures are super low, noise is not existing, and it's just a direct OEM fit and looks natural and great. With this tower cooler, because the air is not dispersed down to the motherboard, you will really need to figure it out how to get some of those VRM heat sinks. Not that with these lower CPUs like the i5 you're going to be doing any overclocking, but still there's a lot of heat generated by those VRMs, and it's nice to have some cooling solution. If you find the stock VRM heatsink that's meant for this chassis, great. I already contacted Dell a few times. They're not selling at the moment, so I couldn't buy any of those, and I cannot find them on eBay or anything like that, so I had to buy my own from Amazon. It's not a perfect direct fit, but works for now, covers majority of the VRM, so no problem whatsoever. And now let's address the elephant of the room. Power supply, 360 watt. This 360 watt power supply is just not well engineered. The power is enough. They chose to not include 6+2 pin connector for the PCI Express, but they only left 6 pin. I don't know why, because my Lenovo Idea Center last year at 310 watts included 6+2. And I was able to feed successfully RTX 2060 with no problem whatsoever. So there's plenty of power to be had. They just didn't give you the option. So now you're gonna have to use one of those adapters they included here that converts from 6-pin to 8-pin. That's how they're feeding the GTX 1660 Ti, and possibly this is how you can feed another RTX 2060. But I'm not a huge fan of these adapters. And they upgraded 500 watt power supply, which not even selling on their part side. You can find on eBay and other sites for around $150. I think it's way too much. But the older model, which is 460 watts, which is exactly the same, fit with all the connectors and everything else. This one can be had for around $100, which I think it's a much better buy. I'm gonna leave the part numbers for all these on the description so you can see it. But my idea is, what I'm planning to do in the future is buy one of those 460 watt power supplies that it's meant for this chassis, has all the connectors, and has one 8-pin and one 6-pin PCI Express connector. That way the upgrade possibilities are much higher. You can step up to 2070, to 2070 Super, to 3060, to 3060 Ti, possibly 3070. I'm not sure, but I will test once I get that power supply. But anyway, that's another thing. That's for another video. For now, I think the G5 is the best among those lower level pre-builds from Dell. Possibly better than the HP, but you know, again, power supply is a big factor because the HP gives you 400 watts and you can step it up to 500 if you want to, a lot cheaper. The 500 watt upgraded power supply is around $100, so that's much better option. Plus, I'm a huge fan of Ryzen, so Ryzen 5 3600 I prefer instead of this i5. But anyway, regardless of components, I think chassis itself and just capabilities of upgradability, I like this better, and I definitely like it better than the XPS. And if you guys are wondering what should you get, I recommend the G5 instead of the XPS, unless you really need the DVD drive for some reason, or if you need SD card reader, which you can get just a USB connector with flash reader. That's not a big deal. But yeah, lengthy video again, but you guys know I go to the details and I try to show you as much as possible that you can upgrade on your own and make these pre-builds better, because again and again and again, this is the only way you can get reasonable priced components and you can get into gaming right away instead of waiting to build your own computer and paying obscene amount of money for resellers and scalpers on the internet for any GPU. This 1660 Ti is between $400 and $500. Crazy amount of money for a GPU that costed like $250, 6 months ago. That's pretty much it, guys. Hit the thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit that bell notification to get notified on every single video coming your way. And the next couple of videos, I'm gonna have a couple of very interesting laptops coming my way that I'm sure most of you will be very interested in. Till next time, guys, you have a wonderful day.